Hello, my name is Evan Jordan. This is my online presentation. For this project, I've decided to cover Yohji Yamamoto due to the fact that he is one of my favorite designers and seemed as if he'd have a lot of interesting information to cover. Yamamoto is a Japanese designer from the early 90s, late 80s that has a focus on minimalism, playing with silhouette, as well as a large focus on asymmetry and minimal differences in his designs. He's majority focused on women's wear, as well as kind of branched into menswear a little bit at the midpoint of his career. And he's quoted saying that he wanted to sexualize the image of the female figure, but not to a sense that it's prerogative, mostly in the collarbones, the backbone, kind of highlighting different aspects of women's bodies. He was one of the first designers to really bring in this large concept that we see today of athletic wear and high-end design. At the time, women were focusing more heavily on wearing high heels, and he's one of the first people that actually put women on the runway in like a sneaker flat type of shoe. Later in his career, he also partnered with the Titan sportswear brand Adidas, where he developed his own kind of collaborative line with Adidas, entitled that Y3. Looking at a small timeline of Yamamoto's career, his first collection was shown in 1977 in Tokyo, and that collection wasn't taken very well by mainstream media as well as consumers. It wasn't until 1981 where he showed his first Paris collection that people were kind of taken aback by his designs and really enjoyed what he was doing. He was kind of revolutionizing the idea of, sportswear and women dressing how they want to rather than wearing heels and dresses. In 1984, he then released his first menswear collection, and then in 1986 released one of his most pivotal collections entitled Destroy, in which the clothes were almost apocalyptic to a sense. There were distressed sweaters, and the silhouettes were very casual but still remained very high-end. In 2000, he opened his first ready-to-wear stores, entitled Wise. These stores were located in Japan, and didn't really expand into Paris and Europe until probably 2004-2005 era. He was in 2002 named the creative director for Y3, which is that company I touched on earlier, where he kind of collaborates with Adidas, which focuses on athletic wear, sneakers, and different things like that. In 2008, one of his last large-scale events was when he showed one of his collections at the Forbidden Temple in Tokyo, which is a large feat for any designer. On this slide, we're looking at 4 different looks that I would classify as signature Yamamoto designs. This garment on the left is from his Destroy collection, and as you can see, it kind of has this uneasy feel while still remaining haute couture. This distressing on the chest as well as the distressing on the sleeve and cuff really just kind of isn't classic in the sense of haute couture. And looking at it, it feels uneasy, but also feels very elegant. Moving on to the second look here, you can see the layering of these different just cuts of fabric and the way that it lays on the body feels very apocalyptic as well, but also still feels high-end. Touching on design aspects that I mentioned earlier, you can see the model here wearing flats, and then also kind of the way that these pants fall is just classic Yamamoto. Looking at the third look, you can see kind of this asymmetrical blazer and the way that these buttons come across the body. A lot of Yamamoto's designs play with line and that asymmetry that I mentioned earlier. The fourth and final look is also a good example of using asymmetry. I included it just because it's a little bit more haute couture look in comparison to the blazer that I previously touched on. But just allowing this line across the front, playing with that line and that asymmetry is very classic Yamamoto. Something to touch on for all of them is you can see that there's a very minimal color palette. Yamamoto's quoted saying that wearing black is a statement. It's a statement that says, if you don't approach me, I won't approach you. And that's a lot of how his designs are. Very minimal, but also kind of putting something forward that makes you stand out to a sense. As previously touched on in the slide talking about the garments that I had decided to include on the PowerPoint. Yamamoto's known for his asymmetry, whether that be, a placket across the front, or any different elements of a blazer, or buttoning, or simply just kind of playing with the traditional lines that you see in garments. I notice it the most in his designs via openings in the front, whether that be they close kind of on a horizontal angle rather than that vertical angle. The minimal color palette as well is very prevalent in his design work. It's kind of evolved since his first collections, but he's slowly implemented different pops of red, different pops of color in depending on just which space he's working in. Also, that post-apocalyptic sense that I talked on earlier, just the kind of ruggedness of some of his designs, the distressing, the different cuts. They feel very ready to wear and utilitarian to a point. The elegant structure blended with street style is something that I touched on again earlier with the different gowns that feel very rough and very raw, but also still maintain this haute couture aesthetic that these large houses often strive for. Yamamoto's target consumer is relatively specific. His clothes are not cheaply priced, for lack of better terms. I would say that the tailored market is kind of like a fashion innovator with a high budget, but they want to focus on the overall quality and being different while still remaining minimal. Wearing a garment that's all black is somewhat of a statement, but just a simple garment isn't what Yamamoto puts out. There's different elements to it. So people that want to kind of maintain that element of haute couture that makes you feel special, but also being able to wear it. The wearability is a very important aspect for Yamamoto. And kind of keeping and maintaining that elegant style of dress, but mixing it with the street aesthetic that you see when, he's pairing like a distressed gown with sneakers or some type of flat. Yamamoto's retail format is somewhat odd. He opened up some stores in the late 80s, early 90s entitled Y's Boutique that didn't take off too well originally. He ended up actually going bankrupt, and that's kind of quoted to him saying that he was never really concerned with the financial aspect of his house and would rather just focus on the creative end and having a lot of people handle his money. Through different, collections and more publicity, he was able to kind of get things back up and running, and ended up working with Adidas. The Y's boutiques took off as well, and then he also does sell wholesale to different retailers like Saks and Barney's, and online retailers as well, such as Essence or Farfetch.